You can't tell me that there's no way they actually came out believing that, oh, they've made a good film.
Yeah, we did. It was very cool.
Because tell me why a 2024 blockbuster will look and feel like a 1990s Japanese to English dubbed film. Like, tell me why. I can clearly see his mouth moving, but the words coming out are not the words he's saying. Tell me why. It is so obvious that the characters in the room are not the characters talking. Like, what is going on?
Tell me why.
I mean, the film wasn't boring. No, it wasn't boring. I'm a huge Fast and Furious fan, but even I can admit that Fast and Furious 9 was boring. Like, I was actually sleeping in the cinema hall halfway into the film because they were trying to be so deep with, you know, their whole family backstory and all that deep extra things that nobody asked for. That was boring.
I got no choice.
Madam Web wasn't boring. It was actually quite engaging because of how impractical it is. It made you feel like, what is going on? Who? Because you're so confused as to what exactly is going on and why is it going on.
This is such a hard question.
For one, it was marketed like a superhero film.
You kind of a superhero.
A superhero.
Super villain as well.
So you see the characters and their costumes and it made you feel like, okay, we're going to be getting some cool action scenes or some cool fighting scenes. Guys, we got nothing. They were literally just running from place to place with no powers, no cool costumes, nothing. So the film is meant to be like an origin story for the 4 Spider Women. So we have Cassandra Webb as Madam Web, Julia Carpenter, Mattie Franklin, and Anya Corazon. But now these are 4 very different characters with very different and unique origin stories. So why would you try to shove all of that into one film? I feel like if they wanted to do a Madam Web origin film, they could have done one with her alone, focusing on her alone.
Who are you, lady? They call me Webb, Madam Web.
Let us explore more of the character. Who is she? Why is she the way she is? What does she want? Who does she aspire to be? Let us understand more of the character before we now bring in other characters. Just like how it was done with the MCU. We first had Iron Man, then we had Captain America, then we had Thor, before we now finally saw all of them in one film as the Avengers. But we first of all got a proper introduction to each character before we now got like a film with all the characters.
No offense, but I don't play well with others.
But with Madam Web, it's like, why are you trying to shove up 4 origin stories into one film? And you're not even doing it properly. In Spider-Man or any superhero movie really, you always have like a cool montage scene after the main character gets their powers. So for example, Spider-Man, when he first got his powers, we saw a montage of him confused about his powers, trying to adjust to the changes in his body, making mistakes while trying to use his powers. You know, trying and failing until he eventually succeeded. With Madam Web, we literally get none of that. She literally gains her full powers in the middle of a fight, a heated fight if I may add, and instantly knows how to use her full powers. She gains her full powers in the middle of a fight and knows what to do with her powers. Like, no character development whatsoever.
It's so, you know, because it wasn't,
She literally remembers someone telling her, oh, with great responsibility comes with great powers. You know, in Spider-Man, we get the version, with great powers come great responsibility. But in her version, she hears, with great responsibility comes great powers. And instantly, she gets her powers in the middle of a fight. Well, the bad guy just stands opposite her, doing nothing, just watching her get her powers. You go, girl, get your powers, girl. And he does nothing. I genuinely feel like they could have scrapped the 3 other girls and given us a proper Madam Web origin story. Because in all honesty, the other 3 characters were so unnecessary. They had absolutely no contribution to the fight, and to be honest, no real contribution to the story at large. The girls didn't even get their powers in the film. They were pretty much powerless throughout the film. So what you see in the trailer where we have them in their costumes is just us seeing 10 seconds into their future when they already have their powers and not their current state. We don't see them getting their powers. We don't see them being able to defend themselves. Nothing. They literally give us nothing but running around and making stupid decisions. This is why I feel like they were an unnecessary addition and they could have been left out of the film.
yeah.
For example, in the Black Panther origin film, inasmuch as T'Challa was fighting his cousin who was the villain, the whole movie was based around him trying to unravel his inner struggles, questioning the ways of his fathers and the kings before him, as well as figuring out who he is as a king. I believe they could have done similar with Madam Web. Since Ezekiel is such a key figure in her past, they could have focused solely on that and given us an in-depth look into her backstory, as well as properly fleshing out the backstory and character of Ezekiel, helping us to understand his motive and why he is the way he is. We as viewers can sympathize with Killmonger because we understand the actions that drove him into becoming a villain, whereas Ezekiel comes across as a flat, poorly written character without a moving or significant enough motive.
As a super villain as well?
Oh my god.
What frustrates me is that the three girls have very interesting backstories and they deserve their own origin films. Julia Carpenter's story is such that she was a broke single mom trying to make some money. She decides to sign up as a test subject in a research by the government. But unknown to her, she was deliberately injected with some toxins which led to her transformation. That is a story that would have been interesting to see. And if they felt Madam Web wasn't important enough for us to want to see her, then they didn't have to make Madam Web. They could have just made a film with Julia Carpenter first, then we could have gotten Madam Web later. For example, just how we had like the X-Men films first, then we now eventually had like the origin stories of Charles Xavier and Magneto. That would have made sense if we had like a good action film with the girls first and even Madam Web, like with them with their powers, like a good action sequence, a good villain, giving us powers, giving us, you know, all the coolness of having powers. Then maybe like a couple of years down the line, we now got like the origin stories to Madam Web. That would have also made sense. But like, it doesn't make sense to try and do an origin stories with 4 key characters shoved up in one film and we don't get anything good. We don't get anything of substance. You know, I feel like Sony just wanted their own. You know, DC has, what's it called? Birds of Prey, and Marvel has the Marvels. You know, Sony wanted a piece of that action. They just wanted to feel among. They needed something. So, you know, let's do the Spider Women. Yay! I'm sorry. Don't get me wrong. I would always love a good girl power film. I would always watch a good all-girls superhero film. But I mean, I would also criticize when it's horribly done. It's giving forced. Like, it's giving a lot of things. It's not giving good.
That was honestly the worst.
Okay, so I don't want to give any spoilers, but for anybody who has watched the film, towards the end of the film, where she's like sitting down and like looking out of the window, so I feel she seems very, you know, happy, very accepting of what has happened to her. Bear in mind, like a month ago, she was a normal girl living like her normal boring life, but like a month after, her life has completely changed. She's in a whole different state mentally and physically. I feel like any human would need some time to process that. Any human would need like good psychological evaluation for you to accept where you are now, because after everything that has happened to her, it wouldn't be so easy to just accept that this is her new normal, this is her new life. But for Madam Web, it's like all smiles, all giggles, like yes, like it's like this is the life she's been used to, or this is the life like she knows, or it just didn't feel right. And I feel like that's what I mean by it's quite impractical. There's so many impractical instances in the movie that anybody can see that this doesn't make much sense. You don't have to be a writer or like a scholar to understand that this doesn't make much sense. This is impractical. This wouldn't happen in like real life. Yes, she's a superhero and she has powers, but we still need to connect with like the human aspect of her. What makes a great character is the fact that we can actually connect, we can kind of relate to this character. But that end scene was so unrelatable. Like it didn't make much sense as far as I'm concerned.
I don't really remember, honestly.
I feel like there's so many other impractical scenes in the film. For example, in the scene where the girls enter the diner and are ordering their food, we see a man holding a newspaper with their faces, and it shows missing girls. And bear in mind that they literally went missing 3 to 4 hours ago. This movie is set in 2003, so there's no social media, there's just the news and like traditional media. So how is it that in 4 hours we already have a newspaper with their faces on the cover of the newspaper? They were not that important, and nobody was looking for them. They all didn't have parents. They weren't like maybe the president's child or like people of like huge importance that a newspaper agency would want to, you know, run their missing pages that quickly. So even if they were going to be on the newspaper, it would probably be the next day, not 3 hours or 4 hours after they went missing. I feel like that doesn't make any sense. Like, am I wrong? You guys tell me in the comments if I'm wrong. I feel like that scene didn't make sense. Then the scene where Ben has to take his sister to the hospital. Why did they all have to follow him? mean, if you know the bad guy is looking for you and you've already found like a safe like hideout, why would you now risk coming out in public for a situation that is not your business? Like, they didn't have to follow Ben to the hospital because they literally didn't know Ben's sister. They had no relationship with her. They could have literally just stayed in the hideout and waited for Madam Web to come back instead of exposing themselves by going out in public. I feel like that whole scene was impractical and unnecessary. I mean, but what do I know? I'm not a writer, so I don't know. I feel like a lot of people have been comparing the film to Morbius. Like, oh, Morbius is way better. Like, looking at this makes Morbius look so good, all this and that. And I'm like, guys, I really liked Morbius. Like, what are people talking about? So why are we comparing this film to Morbius? Because I really enjoyed Morbius. Morbius was one origin story, one direction, one key character. Like, I really liked Morbius. Why are we comparing this to Morbius? Am I the only person that liked? I thought we liked Morbius. Am I the only person that liked Morbius? Do I have bad taste in films? I don't know. So this was just my overwhelming rant on Madam Web. If you enjoyed this video, thanks a lot. Make sure you like and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one. Remember, God loves you.